Okay, so what you're going to have, this is your old mirror. I'm going to try to separate this one just to make it make more sense. This is a Q7 one, which is what I was kind of hoping I could swap onto yours, but with this one, the problem is it was I guess, electrochromatic, photovoltaic, I don't know the proper term, but it's got a different connector here, which yours doesn't have, as opposed to just these. So I was originally thinking I would take this glass off and put it on here to have a backup just in case yours didn't work or there was a problem, but I don't want to risk ruining the electric, dimming on this glass and have to buy another one because they're way more expensive than just these for the Audis. So I'm going to try to just gently separate your old one. So I'm going to lose some of this side, but at least you'll see what's under there, and I'll give you kind of the how to set them and put them back on. This one I had actually, if I'm not mistaken, glued onto this backing. That actually might not be accurate now that I think about it, because this backing looks pretty clean. So it's probably an aftermarket one that came all together. But I've done a bunch of the gluing ones on a couple of 11s that I had, so it's going to be the same process, and it did hold up really well. So with that said, I'm going to try to kind of pull these apart and show you the glue back together process. You said your friend had at his shop some of the yellow. It's this. Really, the key is going to be just patience. You're going to put a thin coating on. Don't get it on your hands. It's like friggin' nightmarish. It'll never come off, and you'll have spider webs all over you for forever, at least as much as possible. But with some gloves and anything really you can use to smear it thinly across it so you have the whole surface of both of them covered, and I'll show you as we get there. And then you want to let them tack up for like 5 minutes at least. Sometimes some people like to touch them together and pull them apart and let them tack that way. You can do that too, but really what's important is you're going to want to have some on each side, some on the mirror, some on the backing, and let them sit apart from each other for a good amount of time before you remate them. So I'm going to pause, I think, while I get this thing apart so I don't curse too much, and then restart so you can see kind of the whole thing go together. Okay, again, on this, I'm going to try to pry apart with maybe a thin knife or something. I'm going to grab that, but that way you'll see kind of getting these apart separate. I think in your case, because it's already starting to come off, this is going to be a more valid, hopefully, view, but this is the rubber backing that's under the glass itself. This is what kind of heat degenerates, and what I've found on almost every single one. You can see, like this is off of the 2011, and it's a similar thing. You get, a little bit of this stuff that peeled and stuck to the original glass, but by and large, the heat deterioration is going to impact this part and the mirror glass itself. Prying on this, because it's all brand new, I think I'm losing that rubber, but I think in your case, if you get under there just a little bit, with something flat, broad, plastic, I think is probably going to be the safest bet. So there's no, individual hard metal pressure points. That's going to be the safest way to do it. So I've got an interior trim tool that I think is probably going to be a thin, safe way to do it on my end. Again, I think if you have even a plastic butter knife, kind of one of those disposable things, that may be a good, safe bet. I'm going to try to get this thing in where you can see what's going on, but okay, so one last time we'll try this. I'm just going to try with the knife because I'm assuming that's more what you have handy. That other piece was pretty thick, so again, not sure if it's going to work efficiently or not. This is already a lot of pressure point, so I'm nervous that we're going to have some separation anxiety. In terms of getting these apart, but the hopeful part is that the backing itself is pretty flexible, so I'm hoping it doesn't create too much of a single pressure point on the mirror in the front, because that's when you get glass breakage, kind of like what I did taking your mirror off, which was stupid on my part. Instead of using my fingers, I tried prying and to try to make it quicker, since we were doing it as just finishing up the job kind of deal, and obviously that wasn't an ideal scenario. So that's why just slow and patient is going to be crucial. It's tough because I'm holding this and I feel it cracking because it's already cracked, but I think on yours, especially if the glue is already bad, getting in between it, which hopefully you can kind of see, really you're just shooting for in between that plastic backing, the glass in the front, and hopefully you can keep it where the rubber is attached still to the backing plate. Because that's really, I think, where your separation is going to be. I think the rubber and the glass are going to be what doesn't adhere. In your case, if it's, if you're seeing floppiness and it's not quite tight. I'm assuming that it's not a case of this having come off the mirror backing, the mirror motor itself inside. But if that's the case, then you just have to pop it back on. But not being there, I can't really tell by feel which it is. You'll have to sort of gauge that. And maybe it'll be, if we can set up a time for it where it's convenient, maybe it'll be easier for you to do it as a FaceTime thing and call me, and we can try to, you know, sort of show me what's going on so that we don't hit a you know, catastrophic failure, or, you know, go the wrong direction if it's not going to be solvable, I guess, in an easy way. But in the meantime, at least I can get you over this and you can kind of see. So now I'm already this deep on the knife. Again, once that separation starts to occur, as long as it's gentle, I think it'll be okay. You know, I guess my biggest concern is that you just don't want to get broken stuff. And as you can see here, now that I'm looking at the back of it, if you're going in from the corner gives you access under here, whereas if you go in from the side, you have the potential of running through that outside holding piece here, but coming up over the middle, and the middle is obviously going to be what is the toughest to separate. So coming in from these corners, it stays under the middle there, and then you can kind of keep going gently and slowly in. Now again, this is fresh, whatever the rubber glue is that they're using, whatever bonds it, and I'm still able to get pretty deep into it without any, you know, issues, concerns, problems. But hopefully yours is even more straightforward because that glue's older and weaker and, you know, heat damaged. You know, almost every one of these that I bought had an issue with it. I actually didn't notice it on yours, which was a bummer. Or I could have changed. Well, actually, no, I had to have noticed it on yours because it had that. Yeah, this was a fresh glass, but I think I ended up buying it as this piece, obviously, since it broke. That was the big problem. So that one that you've got, I took off that 2010, if I'm not mistaken, which is why it's running into the same problems. But the new one, once they've been glued on, has been pretty sturdy. So now that I'm underneath it, in the center, I can kind of slowly come around. And again, same thing, just gentle, you know. There's pressure, but I want to use as little as I can and be as slow and steady as I can so that the glass itself isn't really taking much strain. If you have access to a heat gun or a hair dryer, that probably helps too. But again, I think you're going to find taking that glass off really simple once you get it off the backing, if that's really what's going on there. Like if it's the backing and the mirror housing itself that are coming apart, I think, you know, a little bit of gentle pressure with anything even, and it's probably going to come right off that backing plate, and then you won't have to really worry too much about going the steps that I'm going right now, just because it's kind of done and most of the way is already handled for you in terms of it being weak and not connected well. But yeah, now that I'm going around, even with it cracked, it's still coming off pretty easily and as a unit. Again, I think because of that rubber piece that's there, in your case, if the rubber piece comes off, it should be even more, I think, simple / straightforward, getting it separated from that housing. And then you'll have the rubber still stuck on this backing plate with the heater part intact, which is good because that means all you have to do is put the glass on and the heater part is still going to work because it's just an element underneath the glass that's heating up stuff. So this thing's almost done, I think, hopefully, which will then give me time to get the glue and get it on there and show you kind of the re-gluing / assembly process. The only thing you want to be careful of as you're prying, obviously, is going to be these two heater element pieces because they do have some, I guess, affiliated wire. But again, I think that yours are probably already going to be most of the way apart if you're experiencing what it seems like you're experiencing, which is, you know, that separation kind of breakage or separation, lack of connection. So now that we're really apart, it's just a question. I mean, I can even pull on it and it's coming up, and that's on the fresh one. So yours, in theory, being older and more tired slash aged. Now, I twisted a couple of times to separate this and pull them apart because it's new. In your case, whatever you do, don't twist. You know, just, I was doing one of these to get it to kind of pop because this is already broken. But for you, don't, that's why I screwed it up when I was taking it off. I applied a twisting motion, you put a single smaller pressure point on the mirror, and that's where you're gonna get a break. So in your case, just flat, even pressure, and it probably comes off pretty quick and easy. Rather than mess around with, well, I guess I'll do it on this backing plate, but like I said, in all likelihood, you'll have this backing plate to work with, so make sure you smear the whole thing with the 3M. Get that out of the way, but since we're using the old broken mirror glass just as a demo, I'll keep it that way. But when you're doing it with this yellow crud, just a thin layer, but as much of the backing as you can get. So you want it to be thoroughly covered with very little glue. It's, you know, unlike most glues, the thinner this layer is, the better the adhesion and the quicker it'll dry, which is really what you're wanting to go for. If you have it real thick and goopy on there, it just takes forever and ever and ever, and then you're not going to get a good set, which is what you're looking for, is, you know, like a clean across the board adhesion. So once that's off, you know, watch out for these little stringies. Same thing on this side, just as thin as I can get with still having coverage. And if you know, get a big smear of it out, you could take a stick or, you know, whatever you have handy that you're using to wipe it with, and kind of thin it out, because it will occasionally come out of these tubes goopy, and then you'll get like this big blob in the middle, which again is what you really don't want, because that blob is going to make it that much harder to set the actual glue, or at least that much slower to set the glue. And then that's when you risk having it slide down or being in the wrong place as it's gluing. And, you know, if you can do this on a flat surface, obviously inside, that'll make life a lot easier. Then you don't have to worry quite as much about gravity fighting against you. But in your case, I don't think this will be quite as big a deal because you have the full, I'm hoping, flat backing there. But with this, you know, I'm getting some spider webs in through here. Yours, so hopefully it'll be a full thing and you won't have to worry about that. But now that that's all covered, like I said, what you want to do is let it tack as much as you can. So this, just say you, I guess, got out a huge gloop somewhere, just take something plastic and smear it across a thinner section, and that way you'll get better adhesion. But keep in the back of your head that as you do that, it's going to connect here, so you don't want to do it any more than necessary to keep it kind of from being everywhere on you, on the whatever you're working on, or coming across, you know, electrical contacts like this, stuff like that. But once it's smeared out, you can see even as I touch it, the more I work it, the more oxygen gets on it. That's when it really starts to get tacky, which is why you're going to want those two thin surfaces as opposed to one real thick one or a couple real thick ones. So like up around here where this thing is, I'm real goopy because it's still kind of too thick, whereas these thin little strings dry out super fast. So with one done, you know, doing the same thing on here, you can use judgment on whether you need to do this. Like I said, if you don't have little blobs like this where it looks thicker and yellower, you don't have to, you know, separate it out. This is just going to help with adhesion and help it happen faster than if I just let it sit and kind of try to get tacky. Because if you let it tack and there's liquid underneath, again, same thing, you're not going to get the right adhesion because that liquid underneath hasn't dried, only the top layer has. So when you glue them together, you're not really gluing, you're just kind of attaching the 2 points over like a liquid lake, and it's not going to dry or set the way you want it to get them to be like on and there permanently. So like with these two now, we're almost done anyway. But if I go over the back and match up with the outside of the mirror, that's where you're gonna, you know, line it up and make sure your edges aren't sticking out, because I think that was the biggest problem with the one that you had there, is that the edges were poking out a little bit. In this case, I have glue here, which I have to be a little extra careful of. You, I don't think, are going to need to worry about it. But once those two are down, when I separate them again, that's when I get a good oxygen kind of covering everything, and it starts to really dry out. Just be careful as you're putting it back down that your little spaghetti strings don't come out the sides. But once you're done, that second time around, I just gently push down around the edge here, And other than the fact that it's a broken mirror on the front, this thing's basically going to be almost unmovable the second they touch the second time. So, you know, as you're putting it down that second time, make sure you're where you need to be or pretty darn close, because once I'm here, this thing's not going to come apart again. You know, it's broken, so it's harder to demonstrate, but like now that I'm down the second time, if I want to pull apart, I can get a little movement, but it's not real easy. So you're basically, once that happens, you're almost good to go. Maybe give it 5 minutes of sitting like this before you put it back on. And that way you won't, you know, get any of this crap on you. But you can tell even finger-wise, it's barely tacky now. So once they've hit that oxygen, they're done. I'm going to send this over to you, and hopefully that helps. You know, if not, holler at me and we'll figure something out, okay?